Our book reviewing culture is difficult in New Zealand. For example, Canvas magazine and the Herald, which had regular book reviews, got rid of, I should say, their books editor before Christmas, and now book coverage there is sporadic. So it's always a challenge to get book review coverage and also to get lengthy book review coverage, in depth, well written. So the Faculty of Arts gave me seed funding to set up this new site that launched in March. And we moved the entire review archive from the Academy site into that new site so that they're more accessible. People can search. So if you wanted to look up historical, science, poetry, anthology, you could search by all those terms and see if anything came up.
Welcome to the Research and Reason podcast. Join us as we discuss the latest research, news, and opinion from arts academics at the University of Auckland.
Kia ora koutou, ko Julianne Evans aho. I'm Julianne Evans, the Media Advisor for the Faculty of Arts, and today I'm talking to Paula Morris, an Associate Professor of English, a writer and editor, and the Director of the University's Master of Creative Writing program, among many other things. Morena Paula, thank you for coming in.
Kia ora, Julianne.
I know you always have so much going on, so to prioritise, you've got a new book coming out that you have edited, and it sounds fantastic. Hiwa, Contemporary Māori Short Stories, coming out with Auckland University Press.
So yes, it's a new anthology. I've been working on it for a long time, so I'm very excited to see it being published at last. And it's an anthology, as you say, of contemporary Māori short stories. So all the writers in it are alive, 27 writers, 4 of whom are writing in Te Reo, and the consulting editor for the book for Te Reo was Darren Joseph, who did a fantastic job. The others are written in English, and it includes quite big names that people are familiar with, like Wati Ihmaira, who used to be a professor here, and Patricia Grace, all the way down to emerging writers, some of whom are publishing in print for the first time, many of whom have published some stories and anthologies but don't have a book out yet, and some of whom have published, say, a story collection. And then there are other names that people might know, like Tina Makareti, like Alice Tawhai, people who've been around for a while and doing great things.
Becky Manawatu.
That's true, yes. Becky Manawatu's in there, Whiti Heriaka, people who've recently won the Ockham New Zealand Book Awards. And there's quite a substantial introduction in the book to contextualise the writing of Māori short fiction and publishing of it, all the different anthologies and prizes and big names over the years. And then for each writer as well, there's also a very short introductory essay, giving you a little bit about the writer and some context for the story itself, just as a way in for people and to make it useful, I hope, as a teaching tool.
Has this been done before? It feels like it hasn't.
There have been a number of anthologies over the years, but as I say in the introduction, Māori writing anthologies tend to either be a mix of genres, so including poetry or non-fiction, or have a very specific kaupapa where there might be a theme. So an example is Pūrākau, a very good anthology that came out a few years ago. I've got a story in it. But that theme was about retelling Māori myth. And it sold extremely well. I think it's on its 7th printing right now. But I wanted something where there was no particular kaupapa to the stories, where people weren't expected to write in a particular style, to a particular theme. Unlike the Huia Pikahuia anthologies, which are also fantastic, they didn't have to be submitted to the Pikahuia contest in order to qualify. I wanted a real range of writers and styles and subjects and points of view. Some of the writers live overseas. Some of us have lived overseas in the past. And the idea was, I suppose, really at its heart, was that it's about Māori writers, not about Māori subjects or imposing some kind of Tauranga Māori lens on the whole project. So there's quite a range there, and I think people will be intrigued to read it.
Are these original stories that you commissioned, or are they stories that these are original?
So some have been published before. Some have been published before but have been extensively rewritten, partly because of my intrusive editorial bossiness. And then some are new, and they haven't been published before. We did a combination of commissions where we approach certain writers, like you approach Patricia Grace and say, I'd like a story from you. I'm not going to make Patricia Grace write a new one. And we had a lot of back and forth about which story it should be. And in fact, I didn't realise it until after the fact, but the stories I chose by both Whitty and Pat are both set in Europe. So they're a little bit different from what people might always come to expect from those writers. For other writers, we had an open call, and so I had over maybe 120 stories through our open call, and some of those were quite well-known writers as well, others completely unknown to me. We got a number of writers for the anthology through the open call, and quite a few of them I was reading their work for the first time, so
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was great.
And then you had a lot and you were able to whittle them down to 27
writers. We were aiming for 25 writers, so the book didn't get too huge, because though some of the stories are quite short, our longest one is around 10,000 words. It's quite substantial.
It is long.
So, because I knew I wanted all the additional material in there about the writers and their stories. It was actually based on an anthology series that I found really helpful in the past called The Story and Its Writer, The Story and Its Writer, edited by Ann Charters. It's an American series, though it does include some stories from other places. And I really liked the way it gave context and biography for each story. And so that was, my model for the book. But, we stretched a bit to 27 because there were some very good stories I wanted to include.
You didn't want to leave anyone out.
Well, unfortunately, of course, I did leave quite a few people out who were probably irate and not speaking to me now, because we had to. And even some people who were quite well-known names did not get included, because for me it was the story is the thing. I want the best possible stories in there rather than just to round up all the usual suspects.
Maybe there's room for another one. Probably not right this minute.
Hopefully not. Well, after everyone buys this and buys it in multiple copies and gives it as Christmas presents, they may be clamouring for another.
When's it coming out?
It comes out in early August, and we're planning events in a number of different places, including Auckland and Wellington, because obviously our contributors are spread around the country, and we're going to have a little event in Nelson as well, a little South Island event later in the year during that festival.
Nice. Very good. And that brings me on to another thing that you are involved with, Wharerangi, which is a Maori Literature Hub, which looks a wonderful resource with all kinds of information for and about contemporary Maori writers of poetry, fiction and non-fiction.
Yes.
When do you have time to do anything, Paula?
Well, I've got quite a few websites on the go, as some people know, because I'm also editor of the new Aotearoa New Zealand Review of Books, which was launched with seed money from our faculty. So Wharerangi, the Maori Lit Hub, which is just maorilithub.co.nz, was conceived a few years ago and funded by Creative New Zealand to make the site. It was conceived at a National Maori Writers Hui, where I realised so many emerging writers have no idea where they can get their work published, what opportunities are available to them, what contests they can enter, what residencies they can apply for. And there was a lot of misunderstanding about publishers as well. So people would say to me, publishers aren't interested in Maori writers or Maori books. Well, the opposite is true. The absolute opposite is true. So I wanted a site where people could go and very easily, if you're a Maori writer, find information. Who are the main publishers in New Zealand and who are the obscure publishers as well? Which Maori writers do they publish? What kind of thing do they publish? How do I submit to them? So it's divided up into, very easy to access sections like publishers, like journals, online and print, like residencies, like awards. So people can just find opportunities and also be able to read other Maori writers. So, for example, if you're looking in online journals and you'll see a name there under a particular journal, you can click on it and the link will take you to that person's work. So the site is also useful for people who are not Maori writers but are interested in Maori writing, because it enables them to find things really easily and see who's publishing now, what kind of thing are they writing, let me check it out. I also often recommend the site to any writers wanting to seek things, because it's quite a good snapshot of things like who are our publishers here in New Zealand, because there's several dozen of them on the site, and with all details about what they accept and don't accept, who reads poetry, who doesn't, who publishes commercial fiction, who doesn't, and so on, and then with guidelines about how to submit manuscripts to them. So often I advise any writers who are interested to go and use it as a resource.
Yeah, I thought it was quite fascinating. I didn't realise there were so many places you could get your work published. I mean, some of those names I didn't recognise at all.
There's tons of journals and sites in New Zealand, and obviously our focus was New Zealand, but obviously Maori writers or any New Zealand writer can also submit their work internationally. But for the purposes of this website, we had to keep it under control because obviously trying to update it regularly. And we were quite a small team, all Maori researchers and writers who are working on putting together the information and updating it. And quite often a publisher will email me to say, we've just published a book by this person, can you add it to our entry? So we try to keep it as updated as possible. And in fact, one of the Maori writers who's helping me with it at the moment, Tureen Jones, is a graduate of our Masters of Creative Writing program here at the University of Auckland. She actually lives in Korea now. She's teaching English in Korea, but she helps me with the website because it doesn't matter where you are. And the important thing about having a website, as you know, is that it can be accessed by anyone in the world. So I hope it's a way of people outside New Zealand finding out more about our great writers.
Yeah, it's beautifully designed as well. Who did that?
Our web designer was a New Zealander called Brent Skokel, who's based in Melbourne, but he brought in a Maori design firm called Araki, based in Christchurch, to work on the design elements of the site. And it was really fantastic working with them. So every design element on the site also has meaning, if you like. It has some kind of meaning as well as a visual quality to it. The actual designer I was working with was actually in Auckland, and Hemi Kelly was our te reo consultant. And he pointed out that because I was from the north and so was our designer, some of the design elements were a little bit northern. So what we imagined to be national were in fact just reflecting our own regional bias. So we changed some things to make it work for other iwi and not just our own. But that was a fantastic collaborative process working on the site.
It does look beautiful. It's such a pleasing thing to look at. It's very lovely. And it's got that lovely blue and black. Are those the colours?
Yes, because obviously we spent a lot of time making sure we didn't look too matariki or too much like something else or too much like a bank. You know, it had to look very beautiful and entice people in, but also be very, very simple to use.
You've succeeded. It looks lovely, yeah. And moving back to something you just mentioned earlier, which is the other thing that you're doing, the review of books. How is that getting on? Because that was quite recently launched, wasn't it?
Yes, the Aotearoa New Zealand Review of Books, which in the URL is nzreviewofbooks.com. I hate to say it's just one of my many websites because I've also got the Academy of New Zealand Literature. We had been doing book reviews at the Academy of New Zealand Literature during COVID as a response to the number of media outlets that closed down during COVID, though most of those were temporary, thank goodness. Still, it's difficult. Our book reviewing culture is difficult in New Zealand. For example, Canvas magazine and the Herald, which had regular book reviews, to which I contributed, got rid of, I should say, their books editor before Christmas, and now book coverage there is sporadic. So it's always a challenge to get book review coverage and also to get lengthy book review coverage, in depth, well written. So we decided the Academy site, the anzliterature.com site, was not really the best place for this. So the Faculty of Arts gave me seed funding to set up this new site that launched in March. And we moved the entire review archive from the Academy site into that new site so that they're more accessible. People can search. So if you wanted to look up historical, science, poetry, anthology, you could search by all those terms and see if anything came up. So we publish about 2 reviews a week right now, and I'll continue to do so until my money runs out and I find no other way of making it. We have long-form reviews, so that's reviews that are over 1,000 words, and sometimes they're considerably longer. And as part of the faculty support for this initiative, they help me run webinars on reviewing, on the art and craft of reviewing. And initially that was for our own PhD students and our MCW alums, but I've just got some more funding from the Matatui Foundation, and I will be running those webinars again, but this time putting a call out nationally so that we can have as many people take part as possible And then some of those people, just as happened last time, will be awarded a mentorship. So I set up mentorships with some very experienced editors. Eleanor Black from Canvas, Steve Braunius, former books editor of The Listener, now the literary editor of Reading Room, which is part of the Newsroom site. Mark Broach, who's the current Books and Arts Review editor for The Listener, and Guy Somerset, who was a prior editor both at the Dominion Post and at The Listener. So, and then I did it as well. We all mentored writers to develop new voices in reviewing and to really encourage excellence in reviewing, in-depth reviews, well-argued reviews, not full of people talking about what they can relate to or saying I this and I that, but actually something interesting and valuable for people to read. So I will be running that on a larger scale nationally.
It's very particular skill reviewing, isn't it? Because you've got to actually have confidence to say you don't like something and why, and feel like you can back yourself to say that.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you can be shot down.
Well, also otherwise, as Martin Amos said, it's just a shopping line monologue. You're just saying, I think, and it's like, well, we don't know you. We don't really care what you think. You have to create an argument and quote from the book. So even if you're saying, I think this book is terribly written, here's an example. Well, someone else might read this and think, well, that looks fine to me. This looks like my kind of book. So quotation is extremely important. As you say, the confidence to not only express your views, but to be able to support them, because a review is an argument that you are making. You are making a case for something and giving evidence to support it. And you're also trying to write something that is interesting and well-crafted of itself, so people don't get bored after the first paragraph and not bother to read on.
And it's quite labour-intensive, isn't it? Because you've got to actually read the book, and some of those books have got a lot of pages.
Yes, we do pay our reviewers, but as everyone who's engaged in book reviewing around the world knows, you are never paid quite enough for the amount of work you do, unless possibly you write for The New Yorker, I don't know. But we wanted to be offering New Zealand readers, writers and publishers something similar to the Sydney Review of Books or the Los Angeles Review of Books. I mean, the big leaders in this field are obviously the London Review of Books and the New York Review of Books, which are both print and online. But the crucial thing was that we had well-informed, well-argued, well-written, long-form reviews. We also have a relationship with the listener now, so some of our reviews, the listener will ask for them in advance of publication. They'll have a shorter version, like a 600 or 700 word version that works for the listener. It'll appear first there and then in long form on the site so that we can reach many more people.
Great. And finally, you yourself are doing something yet again, organising a new prize for the Master of Creative Writing for the best portfolio every year for that 1-year course. What's that going to look like?
So our alums for the MCW are very loyal. We have a really good community, very good community of writers, and a number of them have donated money towards a prize, a new prize. And we wanted something that spoke to the heritage of literature at the University of Auckland. So in the early 30s, from 32 to 34, there was a literary journal here, which literary people, literary historians know very well, called Phoenix, or the Phoenix. And it was started by students and other emerging writers in Auckland, and some of the names associated with it went on to become very, very influential in New Zealand writing and publishing. So including Alan Curnow, say, or Charles Brash, or R.A.K. Mason, all very young and all being part of this journal. There was also someone who maybe people are less familiar with, Bob Lowry, who, when he started work on the Phoenix, was 19 years old. Now, he's an enormously important person in New Zealand publishing history because as a typographer and as a designer of books. So he designed the Phoenix, then he set up his own press when they all got chucked off campus, and then eventually he went to work at the Caxton Press with Dennis Glover in Christchurch and was responsible for many landmark New Zealand publications. So I felt that this journal was really part of our own New Zealand literature forming back almost a century ago. And we wanted to pay tribute to it and to also remember that all of us writing now here and in Auckland and in New Zealand are part of a river, if you like. We're just another current in the river. We have our own inheritance of what's gone before, which we might choose to work with or reject or subvert. But I like the idea of celebrating that heritage and thinking how we are all adding to it all the time with new voices, new points of view. I mean, in those days, the majority of writers for the first journals and the first publishing houses were very much white and male and university educated. Obviously, that changed through the decades, and now we pride ourselves at the Master of Creative Writing program in Auckland for having such a diverse program, not just ethnically diverse, but diverse in terms of people's backgrounds and diverse in terms of age. Some people are a bit shocked, I think, when they arrive on the course and find the range of people that we have there.
I think that's what makes it great, though.
Yeah, 2 years ago, our oldest person on the course was 80.
Oh, wow.
Writing a fantastic YA novel, which I must nag her to finish. But we have a strange and diverse and interesting group every year, and I'm glad that we can tie ourselves to the first steps of the past, knowing that everyone every year is taking their own first steps. Now, I should say that some of our writers on the MCW are published writers. They already have books published, but often they come on the course to take a new direction. So whether people are writing or publishing books for the first time or simply taking a new direction, we, the program and the prize, supports them.
How great. The phoenix rises again. What a great way to finish. Ngā mihi, Paula. Thank you for coming.
Kia ora.
You've been listening to the Research and Reason podcast. Stay up to date with the Faculty of Arts by following us on social media.